Hi guys, so today's video is going to be my June TBR. I am recording this quite early into the month of May, and that's because my dad is coming home from the hospital today, which I'm so excited and relieved for. But as a result, I'm staying with him. I've moved in with him to help him out, and I have to kind of pre-record a lot of things way in advance and plan way in advance. So things could potentially change with this TBR, but this is what I'm planning on for right now. Jumping into it though, the first book on this list would be Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in her Farseer trilogy, the first being Assassin's Apprentice. And I read Assassin's Apprentice a little while ago. I didn't love it. I thought I would. It had so many of the things that I normally like while reading it, not just I heard about it and thought I'd liked it, but I read it and it seems like I should have loved it. But there's just something that didn't really click with me. The story follows this young boy in the first one. He is a man, but he's kind of telling you about his life, so you see him as a boy. But as a result of that format, it is very formal in its presentation, and I think there's something somewhat conflicting for me in having a formal presentation with a younger character. There's something about it where when I'm following younger characters, I don't feel like I'm really feeling what they're feeling because I'm being told from the adult's memory, if you will. So I think that created a slight disconnect for me for the character, even though I feel like it was a very character-centered story, which I love, and also the character struggles with depression, and I just feel like I can relate to stories where the characters go through things like that. So there's so many things about it that I definitely feel they appeal to me. Maybe I'm hoping that in having the character older in the second one, it will remove whatever, if I'm pinpointing correctly why it didn't click with me, I'm hoping that will be out of the picture because the character will be older in the second one. I've heard great things regardless. I've heard a lot of people say that the series only gets better and better as it goes. So I'm hoping that's true for me. Next up would be The Reluctant Queen by Sarah Beth Durst. This is the sequel to Queen of Blood and the second in a trilogy with a fascinating setting. I'm currently reading the first one and really enjoying it. It follows this society, this world, where they live in a forest setting, and within this forest setting are these very violent, I really want to kill humans spirits, and they really just have two instincts. One instinct is to protect and create, which involves protecting the forest, the setting. Humans happen to disrupt the forest, harm the forest just purely in existing, so spirits hate them, and their other instinct is to basically kill them, and so they have to be held in check by a queen who has magical powers that kind of can control them. Her powers should be absolute until the day she dies, and then a new queen needs to ascend. There's a school setting where they try to train girls and essentially look for the next queen so that as soon as the current queen dies, they can immediately put that girl up onto the throne, because otherwise these spirits will go crazy and kill a bunch of people. And the story kind of is propelled forward right away at the beginning when you see these spirits violently kill a whole village of people, which is not supposed to happen. The queen's power is supposed to be absolute. It's supposed to keep that from happening. I'm currently really enjoying that first book. I think the setting is amazing. The spirits are creepy and weird, and they're not like ghosts or anything. They're just creatures, basically, and woodland type creatures, and sometimes they're like people and sometimes they're like fairies. The way they kill people is, oh my gosh, there's this one scene in the first one that I'm like, blah. I just feel very gripped by the story. I have seen some people talk about it. I know my friend Joshana loved it. She's kind of the one that really brought it to my attention, and unless something terrible with the writing or story happens in the end, I'm planning on picking up this sequel. Next up would be a historical fiction story, The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell, and I've heard so many amazing things about this story. I love a good Viking story, and I have seen this recommended time and time and time again. I'm so pumped for it. Next to fantasy, historical fiction is my other favorite, and I just feel like I never know where to go to find really great historical fiction because there's just so many, and I've heard so many great things about this author. Plus, it's Vikings, and I just think Viking stories are awesome. I've also heard that there's a fantastic adaptation of this, so I'm excited for, if I like the story, I can also watch the show. I think that'll be really fun. But this is the buddy read for June, so if you are wanting to read this alongside my husband and me, you are welcome to do that. I will have a breakdown for the story in the app Byzance, who I've worked with in the past and I am working with for this video. They are a buddy reading app, and that's their main focus. You can also categorize books for yourself as want to read, currently reading, and read, and there's different chat rooms, if you will, for the different stages, so you can chat with people no matter where you're at. You can also create your own breakdowns. You can have specific parts that you want to talk about. They kind of have two different sections where it's like an ongoing chat, and then they also have one where you can have the more spoilery, okay, I want to talk about this chapter specifically, and then if you want to see a person's thoughts on that part, you click on it and then you'll see the discussion. It's a great way to do a buddy read and not worry about being spoiled in case you fall behind. Next up, we have another book that, depending on how I feel about the first one, I may or may not pick up the second one, but I'm thinking I will. That would be Half the World by Joe Abercrombie. This is the second book in his young adult series, the first one being Half a King. I haven't yet started Half a King. I plan to very soon, so as a result, I can't comment too much on the first one. I've heard that this one isn't quite a direct sequel the way that a lot of other sequels are, that there's a few different things going on in this one to the point where it's almost like a companion novel, which I find very interesting. I'm a fan of Joe Abercrombie. I'm very excited to see his writing in his young adult books. I've heard really, really good things about this series, so I'm hoping I like that first one. Next up, we have Fireborn by Rosaria Munda. This is a story that, from what I've seen with other people talking about it, it's somewhat Russian-inspired fantasy. It's kind of got a historical fiction flair within a fantasy world that has dragons, and we follow two different perspectives that have been affected by a lot of violent things that have occurred in their world, and these two people become really good friends despite the circumstances, and if not for all the terrible things that had happened, these two characters would be on completely different sides of life, if you will. And I've just heard really, really amazing things. I've heard a lot of people say they don't know why more people aren't talking about this series because it is just so good, and that it's a fantastic first book into a series. If you have dragons, I'm already intrigued, but then you have a historical fiction flair, and that just ups it for me. Plus, hearing good reviews for it, I'm excited. The next two books are not officially out yet, but they will be out soon, and I'm hoping to just jump right into them. I do like to occasionally pick up new releases because a lot of times, I was just talking about with Fireborn, how I've heard what other people have to say about it, and I really like with new releases that I don't know what anybody has to say yet. It's purely my thoughts. It's not affected by what other people are saying, and I like a mix of both. I like being a part of a community and seeing how my opinions fit into what I've heard, and then I also like knowing this is really what I think about this book. It's almost like the purest form of discovering what you think, if you will, because I just think it's very difficult to not go into stuff with a bias. But anyway, enough blabbering and actually mentioning the books. We have The Gilded Ones and Forest of Souls. I'll start by talking about The Gilded Ones, which is an African-inspired fantasy. We have a girl who, because of her blood, which has, from what I gather from the synopsis, essentially impurities, because of this, her life goes down a certain path, and she ends up joining this group, this army of other people like her. And then with Forest of Souls, this one follows a character who she's training to become like an assassin spy type person, and then something happens to her friend dies, but then she might bring her back from the dead, and all of a sudden she's like, wait, what? I have these powers? And I just think that it sounds really cool. I also think that the cover is very intriguing. I don't normally love covers with people on them. There's something about this one. It's got just some mood to it that intrigues me. The last two things on this list are things that I'm wanting to actually start in the month of May, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish them. So 3 of them would be the second book in the Queen of the Tearling series by Erica Johansson, Dry by Neil Shusterman, and then Winter, which is the conclusion to the Lunar Chronicles. I mentioned them in a previous TBR, so I won't really talk about them too much, but these are all ones that I'm hoping to start in May. might not get around to them, we'll see. And then the last one would be Under Heaven by Guy Gavriel Kay. Guy Gavriel Kay is an author. I think I have more books by this author than any other author that I haven't read, meaning I've never read any of Guy Gavriel's works, but I now own all 3 of the Tinavar Tapestry, I think is what it's called. I own Tigana, I own Sailing to Sarantium, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, and then now I own Under Heaven. It's just my phone is stacked on top of it. I discovered Under Heaven when wanting to participate in the Asian Readathon, and I was like, all right, I have seen a lot of fantasy that is inspired by Asian culture that is young adult, but I would like to also see if there's some that's for adults, or at least marketed, not that it's only for adults. But I found out that Guy Gavriel Kay had one called Under Heaven, and I've heard such amazing things about him. I've wanted to read him for so long, and I keep being like, maybe I'll start with Tigana, maybe I'll start with the Tinavar Tapestry. I keep having different ones, but I think I'm going to start with Under Heaven. I love Asian-inspired fantasy, and I've been talking about how historical fiction is my next favorite besides fantasy, and I've heard his writing is basically historical fiction, but with fantastical elements put in. I think that sounds amazing, and I am so excited to get into that one. That's it for my June TBR. Definitely let me know if you have any specific thoughts about any of the books I mentioned. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.